welcome back to another video. Welcome to my channel. If you're here joining us live, leave a comment in the chat box and say hi. If you're new here, I'm Vanessa. I'm a YA fantasy, paranormal, and horror writer and book publisher. On this channel, I talk about books, writing, and all things related to storytelling. And today's live stream is part of my monthly Writing Diversity series on here. It's a series I created to help writers learn how to write diverse characters. So today I'm chatting with the lovely Nia Damany. Did I say it right? Damany. Okay. And we're going to be discussing queer Caribbean American characters. So, Nia, do you want to say hi and give like a brief introduction to yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone who's watching. Who will be watching later. My name is Nia Damany. I am currently a graduate student and educator, and I research education policy. And I'm excited to be here. What else?
That's great. No, I'm excited to have you on here. So, before we get started, you guys know I always give this quick disclaimer before starting any interviews. So, I want to remind everyone again who's watching that no group is a monolith. And while Nia is here graciously sharing with us her experience being a Caribbean American and part of the queer community, hopefully this will help other writers out there. But keep in mind that her experiences do not reflect or represent everyone in those groups. So, as always, make sure you do your research and get sensitivity readers for your stories. So, with that being said, we can dive right into the questions. So, the first one I have is, can you just share a bit about your Caribbean background and kind of what part of the Caribbean you're from, and did you grow up there or did you visit often?
I was born in New York, and my mom's side of the family is from Guyana, and my father's side is Trinidad. But I identify heavily with my Guyanese side. I visited the Caribbean and Guyana growing up. I wouldn't say often as some of my other family members, but I was definitely out there, and it left such a big mark on me, getting a chance to see, where my mom was born and where she went to school and all the places that she visited as well. So, yeah, I'm very much a Caribbean girl.
And now I'm kind of wondering if a lot of us Caribbeans were born in New York too. So I was born in New York, but
I think that's like one of the biggest stopping points.
Yeah.
New York, Georgia, I think was like a huge place a little bit after. But New York is an extension of the Caribbean. Like, let's just go there. There are whole neighborhoods that you can go into and be like, oh, this is Jamaica, or this is Guyana, this is Puerto Rico, like that's how New York is set up.
Yeah. So, let's see. Can you share what you love most about the culture and like what makes it special to you?
So many things. I think of food because I'm just a hungry girl. It's so much more. I think that Caribbean culture is a very vibrant culture. It's loud, it's colorful. I think that's what I identify with most. And that food. Like there's something delicious or like really spicy. We'll say it has loud pepper in it. Like it's just a very loud and jubilant type of culture.
Yeah. What's like your favorite food or thing that your family makes?
So much, all of it, all of it. Black pudding, white pudding, chicken fruit salad, pulori, chana, cook up rice. I could go on and on. I could talk about food all day. Um, but yeah, I have a nickname at home. It's
Mhm.
Foodin.
Food.
Yeah, that's the one who eats. So that's me.
My older brother, his favorite thing, since we're Haitian, he always wants my mom to make griot, and it's griot is, just for those who don't know, basically fried pork, um, but just the way it's made, it's like that's the one thing he always asks anytime it's if it's his birthday or holidays coming up. That and the mac and cheese. So
Okay,
you know, and the mac and cheese,
so crazy. Correct.
those two, and he'll be happy.
So in griot, like, what are the spices? I don't think I've had it before.
Oh, I couldn't tell you because I've never watched my mom make it, but there's a lot of different spices. Um, we have this thing that's like, it's called epis. It's a bunch of different spices and herbs mixed together, and they use that on like basically everything, all our meats, all our foods. My mom will use it in her rice. Um, but yeah, I it's I've seen my uncle make it, but I don't remember all the different things that go into it.
But it's like a dry spice.
It's not it, it's not really dry, but it's not like, it's kind of hard to explain. It's not.
Because I'm trying to like make connections.
It's kind of. It kind of resembles like a paste.
Okay, yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of our basis as well is bean seasoning, where we just like put a bunch of like fresh herbs in a blender
Mhm.
and some like peppers and
Yeah.
that's how we season up the meat.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty much like that.
Mm.
Um. So let's see. Uh, what are some of your favorite traditions that are part of, either Guyanese or your Trinidadian culture?
I'm still like learning more about Trinidadian culture, honestly. I've only been through the airport in passing, but I do know that they have like around Christmas they'll do parang, which is like special kind of like Christmas music, and of course their carnival is well known. Shout out to everyone in Trinidad right now, winding up themselves on the road. Wish I was there. One day I will make it out there. But definitely in Chinese culture, it's also around the food. Like there's a season for everything. There's like we're eating pepper pot, which is our meat stew on Christmas, and we're eating garlic lamb. Some people eat garlic pork around Easter, and that's what feels like really. That's what makes me feel connected to my culture is the food and the season that it comes in.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh.
What about in Haiti?
Um. In Haiti, trying to think if there's like a specific celebration or tradition that we do. I mean, the only thing that really stands out or comes to mind is just New Year's, because the New Year's Day was Haiti's Independence Day. And so, they always have this special soup, this type of soup that's made for New Year's, um, which I'm like, I kind of feel a little bit of like a bad Haitian in the sense because I never want to eat the soup. I'm not much of a soup person, and so I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Ooh,
But
what is the soup? What's in the soup?
there's a lot of different things. Potatoes, there's meat. There's a bunch of different things they put in it. But I'm just like,
Not a soup girl.
yeah.
Yeah, there's some things where I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna eat this a whole lot, but
Yeah.
I respect it.
Oxtail, you can give me oxtail. I'll eat that
Ooh,
all day, every day.
day. But it's so sad because these oxtail prices are getting out of hand.
I know.
Getting out of hand. The rest of the world has caught on, and
Mhm.
now we're in the situation we're in.
Yeah.
Back to oxtail. Everyone find a new meat.
Right. Right. Find something else.
Yeah, truly.
Um, there was something else I had thought of when you were sharing. Because you mentioned something with Easter a few moments ago.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering, for your culture, either from the Guyanese side or the Trinidadian side, um, does either of your side of the family practice any like African religions or spirituality?
Um, I think my family in particular is very like Christian, and there are spiritual practices that people have, but I think it gets associated with witchcraft, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So they'll say like, "Oh, that one is doing obia," or I guess that's our version of voodoo, and it's not like something that people are happy about. But I do definitely know that people have mixed spiritual practices. Like they will go to church, but they also have their own thing going on. And I don't know too much about it, but I am very curious to learn more myself about these different spiritual practices in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
What about your family?
I'm very curious as well. My family is very Christian as well. I think that's just part of the Caribbean is like a lot of people became Christian, and so of course, like you said, they view voodoo and all that as witchcraft. But I've actually been doing some research into voodoo and gotten some books on it. So I've been wanting to learn more about it as a religion and how it's practiced and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that like we have that similar background, like you grow up in this culture and Christianity is such a big part of it. And then later, that's when you start asking, well, what about this other thing and that other thing? And basically, it's up to you to find out the information because no one's going to take you through that.
Yeah. Let's see. The next question was: are there any uh, special holidays? Any special holidays that you and your family celebrate?
Like Guyanese holidays.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we celebrate Guyana Day. It's more of like about Guyanese culture in the diaspora. So there are there are a lot more people, Guyanese people, probably outside of Guyana than in Guyana, actually. So, I mean, we team up with all the other islands, and we'll have different kind of carnival type of celebrations all over the world. That's like New York, Toronto, Miami, Atlanta. And when I was living in Georgia, there was every May a Guyana Day celebration. And people would go to a park, there would be maypole, there would be, all kinds of food out there, playing soccer, cricket, whatever, they had planned for the day. And it was such a great way because I always associated it with the beginning of summer, end of school. There's going to be a big old barbecue Memorial Day weekend. Family's going to fly in. There's going to be a bunch of food. Foodin is excited. And yeah, we get to just be in our Caribbeanness, listening to our music and having a good time this summer.
Yeah. Cool. Um, so with when you said in Guyana, like there's a lot of Guyanese in the diaspora outside of it. Um, have you like I guess I'm thinking, since you're a researcher, have you looked at where um, where people usually tend to go
Yeah,
in the diaspora outside of Guyana?
yeah. I feel like the epicenter is New York.
New York.
Maybe because I'm from there, but I think Toronto also is a huge place where Guyanese people are, and the UK.
Mhm.
Guyana was once a British colony, so a lot of people would go to the UK to go and study, and there are a lot of Guyanese people out there as well. But I mean, we're everywhere. It feels like, and I was surprised to see. I mean, I have family out here, but I was surprised to go into like a Walmart parking lot and see a car with like a big old Guyana flag on their license plate. I was like, okay, we out here. We are in Arizona. Not just me and my cousins. It's more people. So we're sprinkled everywhere. I feel like, but we need to open up more restaurants.
Yes, definitely should. Um, so let's see. So the next few questions go into some of your queer identity. Um, you've identified as queer. So what was it like discovering that part of yourself? Was it exciting, scary, nervous? Like, what was that like for you?
It was all of the emotions. It was all of them because like now knowing who I am when I look back, especially like on my early life before I knew about queerness or anything like that, I think of memories and I'm like, that was really queer, like that was some queer stuff that was happening. But at the time, it just felt so normal. Um, and it wasn't until I guess around high school where I like understood about different sexualities and I was placing myself that I was just like, oh, I'm this thing. And this thing, people have told me not to be specifically. So it was definitely scary um, in that regard. And of course, there's always joy when you find your Well, I guess there's a bit of joy and fear when you find your community in different places, um, because you feel like finally I'm here, but how long is this going to last? Because I've been told that this is not a safe space.
Yeah.
Mm.
What when you kind of were discovering that part of yourself, did that happen early on, like during your teen years, or was that later on in your life?
It was during my teen years, and I was kind of outside of my home at that point. I had gone to school away from home. So I was completely outside of my culture, and I was learning so many more things about the world than just like what it means to be a Caribbean woman in a Caribbean household. And so in that regard, I had the ability to explore different stuff. And when I understood who I was in terms of my sexuality, I was like, all right, so what's the next step here? Because it seems a little scary. But
Yeah. Was so in Guyanese or Trinidadian culture, is it accepted to be a part of the LGBTQ community?
I'll say that there are like individuals who are accepting, definitely. You're gonna find that everywhere. But as a culture, to my knowledge, I don't know that there's like a pride in Guyana. I could be wrong, someone correct me. But it's not, and it's definitely not something that, in family gatherings, they're privileging conversations about, LGBTQ rights and things like. No, it's very. Let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said individually, yes. So how was your family and friends? Were they supportive when you came out?
Yeah, some were. But I think I made a point not to like come out. I think that everyone has a different approach to how they let people know what their romantic life is like. And I never wanted it to be me on a soapbox yelling to my family and friends. But in conversation in our growing relationships with people, when I felt like safe and that I could trust them, when I would, let them know, or they would just see me living my life and they're like, okay, yeah, that's what she's doing. But I definitely felt supported by those individuals who did support me.
Did I guess I was thinking, looking back now, was there anyone who like you didn't really have to say anything because you know how some people are like, I know, like
Yeah.
they know you well enough that they.
Yeah. No, definitely. Especially with like my friends from undergraduate. I went to a women's college. Not Leo classes. Yeah. And there was just no need to explain myself there because a lot of us were queer in the first place. It was almost like shocking to find a straight person in that environment. So yeah, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, we know."
Yeah, I was yeah, I thought of that because for the book club, for the band book club, we were reading All Boys Aren't Blue, and the author talks about his experience in his family and how like a lot of them he didn't like it, just his mannerisms and ways. Everyone could kind of tell without him having to say anything. Um,
Mhm.
Eventually he did, I guess, come out, but um, he didn't really have to say much. Family, and what I love about his story, which I wish could be every queer person's story, unfortunately, it's not. But he had a very loving, accepting family who, um, were very supportive and like had other queer family members that were role models in his life. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that people underestimate how important that is just to be supported
mhm,
because especially I mean, for people in my family who I've talked to about this, especially the older generation, they associate queerness automatically with danger. Um, and so it's not necessarily always that they're not accepting, but it's like, oh, if this is the life that you're going to live, like be prepared for danger, And so it's automatically a scary thing for them, and to just be acknowledged and accepted is really important because it is a scary thing at first. I'm here in the States and I people don't look at me and automatically assume that about me. Quite the opposite actually. But for some people, especially if you are a woman presenting masculine or an effeminate, more feminine man in a specific space, those things can be more noticeable and dangerous to those people. So having someone to support you is everything.
yeah, yeah, that's. Let's see. My next question was, so you've traveled to different parts of the world. What was it like experiencing those cultures, and can you share like what ways they were maybe similar or different from yours?
Um, yeah, very different parts of the world. I was in China for some years, and then I went to Uganda after Africa, and that alone was just two different places. But I think what drew me to China firstly was that we have Chinese heritage in our family. Guyana is known as like the land of six races. So there are Chinese people, Indian people, Black people, Portuguese, white, and the native people of the region. And my family has this Chinese last name. And when I was growing up, everyone was always like, "Who's that Chinese man walking you to school?" So I was just like, in the back of my mind when I was growing up, I was just like, we are Chinese, but not, and that when I had the opportunity to learn the language, I was like, okay, I got to do this. And then going there, I think I was searching for those connections. Like I could see it through food, definitely. Um, and a little bit in the way of like how families are structured. They're very close knit. Um, so that felt familiar. But what was interesting and different was how I was suddenly being viewed. And growing up, I always saw myself as, I'm a Guyanese American girl. But there, it was just like, oh, you are the American. And all these questions about America that I didn't even know about were getting, sent to me. Like, I don't know anything about this. I've been in this like little Caribbean bubble. But that was cool. And then going to Uganda, I always thought that Uganda and Guyana were like sister countries because they have the same climate, they're along the equator, they grow the same foods. And even some of like the isms, the sayings are pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously it's a different world. But I felt really at home there because of those slight similarities.
Okay. And you said you learned the language. So you learned Chinese while you were staying there.
I learned it before
Before.
high school. Yeah, and then I just kept learning it in school and undergrad, and then I was like, okay, I have the skill. I need to go use it somewhere.
Can you share like how would you greet someone, like hello, my name is in Chinese?
I think there's a difference between like greeting someone and showing respect and then greeting someone that you know. So there are two different versions of you, and so it's two words. It's like you and good.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's someone you know, you'd be like ni hao. But if you're trying to show respect, you would say ni. It's like similar, but a little bit something at the end. Yeah, ni hao.
Okay. Ni hao is if you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
Ning is formal.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other part of your question was like, hello, my name is.
Yeah, I mean, if you.
My is 我的.
What the?
我的.
What the?
And name is 名字.
What is it?
名字.
名字. What the 名字?
Yes.
Okay.
我的名字是 Nia.
Oh. Cool. So what the 名字是 Vanessa.
Okay, Vanessa. Learning languages out here.
No, like it. I think it would be fun to learn another language, but I'm also like, I feel like I probably would not retain anything unless I was like in a place where I had to speak it 24/7 and had no choice.
Yeah, truly. But what was also fun about learning it when I was in the States was that like a few of my other friends were learning it. And basically we would use it to kind of like talk shit every now and then. Like someone was in the room and we didn't want to like say it in English. We'd be like, oh, we know Chinese, so we're gonna say it in Chinese.
I find it the one thing I find funny is when people think you don't know the language they're speaking, but you do. So, like at an airport one time, some of the flight attendants were Haitians and they were speaking Creole. It's like, oh, you guys. I talked back to them in Creole and was like, oh, you speak Creole too? You're Haitian too.
Yeah, like, yeah, I got it. Grow up speaking Creole.
Yeah. You grew up speaking it?
I mean, I didn't really recognize Guyanese language as a Creole, but now that I'm seeing, like, it is.
Mm-hmm.
I did grow up hearing it, not so much speaking it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would say certain things in class, and my teachers would be like what is that? Like they're just, it's all English, but it's a different kind, you know. So instead of saying like I'm upset or I'm angry, I would say like this person vexed me, you know. Like what does that mean? Yeah.
I what I find interesting though is like I didn't know this till I was much older, that there are different types of Creole. And so when I was younger, when I was a kid, I thought every Creole was just Haitian Creole. I
Mm,
thought if you said you spoke Creole, that meant you were speaking Haitian Creole. And then I got older and I realized there's a lot of different Creole, and you're not gonna understand all the different ones.
mm-hmm.
But what's interesting, I saw this video on YouTube a while back where it was like um, people speaking their Creole from different countries, Creoles, and trying to see. So, like one person would speak it, and then the others would try to see if they could understand what they said,
Mm-hmm.
and see like what you kind of see which countries are closest in the language, which ones have similar words and stuff. And so
Right.
I was looking at it and listening to each language, and I was like, oh, I got some of that. I know what that word is. I know what that reads. Okay. So that was fun to watch. If I find that video, for those of you watching the live stream or the replay, I will link that video down in the description below if I find it again. But I thought that one was really interesting.
Okay, so I grew up with a lot of Haitian people on my block in Queens, and I know that sac passe means something. Is it a greeting?
Yes,
Okay. Sac
it's like, what's up? Hey.
okay. And maboule is like the
The response
gotcha.
was like, yeah, yeah, so that's it.
And I think I've seen the video that you're talking about. It'll be like someone from Haiti, someone from
Mhm.
um, Guadeloupe, Martinique, or
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and they'll just like compare the different
Hmm.
notes.
Yeah, I thought that video was really interesting and really cool to watch. So, yeah.
So, do you know where in Haiti your parents are from?
Yeah, it's called Cap Cap in Creole. Cape Haitian, I guess is how you would say it in English. Um, it's I don't know how it's outside of the main, like outside the capital, but I couldn't really describe where exactly it
Mm-mm.
is. But
Do you think
um,
that there's like a specific culture of that place versus like Port-au-Prince or some other places? In
um, interesting question. I don't know because I I don't think I we have any family that live in Port-au-Prince. Well, actually, no. Wait, I'm trying to think. Because I have an uncle, Alex. I can't remember if he lived near Port-au-Prince or not. He might, but I'm not sure that I know if there's like a difference between the capital Port-au-Prince and Cap-Haitian, except for that, it's more rural out there. It's more country, more rural.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know what differences there would be really
Yeah.
other than that.
And the reason why I ask is like going into writing, you know, like there's so much diversity within the countries that they're from. And I
Yeah.
think about like when I was in Uganda, people would be like, "Oh, how's America?" And I'm like, "Which part?" Like there's New York, there's LA, there's Nebraska. There's so many parts to it. Where do
Sure.
I begin? And I think the same probably can, for sure, can be said about our own country.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Um, I mean, I know no one right now wants to be in the capital and Port-au-Prince with everything that's happening. Um,
Solidarity.
yeah, a friend of my mom's friend was actually there recently, a couple weeks ago. It was like, it's bad. They didn't stay in that part for long because they arrived there, but then they went to Cap Haitian. But yeah, he was like, the city has gotten so bad. So, not not much else. I don't think I would know much else about the city.
Mm.
But I do know my mom loves where she grew up. They have they're like by the beaches and stuff. So yeah, she loves going to the beach and stuff when she was over there. But let's see. Trying to see where I left off. So my next question was just, what's something that you've learned from being in those cultures that you would want others to know?
I think about Uganda specifically because that's the last place that I was. And I remember before I went over there, someone was saying like, "Oh, I would never go there because it's a terrible place for like queer people." And when I got there, I actually experienced like one of the most welcoming and beautiful queer communities that I've ever been a part of. And it just made me think of like how media can shape a lot of how we see the world. Um, and I would say that what I learned was there are queer people everywhere. And even on that, Amnesty International list of worst places to be queer, there are queer people there and they have community there. And I think it's incumbent upon people who live in countries where there is more queer freedom to somehow like reach out to our queer brothers and sisters in different places and show solidarity and support.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true because there are, queer people are everywhere from the beginning of time. So, and I kind of sometimes think and wonder, like, what some of these countries, what it would look like for queer people in some of these countries had they not been colonized
Mm.
by the British, the French, the Spaniards. um, because I'm just thinking of like, I don't know for sure because I haven't looked into, like I said, the different um, spiritualities and religions before colonization and everything. But I just feel like it might have been a bit more accepting. Um,
There was definitely a different cosmology, a different understanding about the world,
mhm,
and it wasn't binary
right,
as we have it now. So there was so much gender diversity. There was different family structures completely,
right.
and now we have to do the work of like figuring out, well, what was that all about, um,
Hmm.
and ask those questions because I'm also very curious.
Yeah. Oh. So, it's up to us to dig into the research.
Do the research.
Um, so, is there, when it comes to writing queer and or Caribbean American characters, um, what are some stereotypes or tropes that you think writers need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think going back to what we were talking about before, just like the diversity within a culture, within a country. Um, First of all, diversity within the Caribbean, because not all English speaking Caribbean people are Jamaican. Just want to put that out there. um, and not all of us live in places where there are like white sands and blue waters,
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of Guyana, the water is pretty murky, and it's dark. Um, so there's that. But then there's like the diversity of people. I just remember telling people when I was in like predominantly white institutions in education, like my family's Caribbean, and the assumption was like, oh, you got like Rastas and you got smoke weed. And I mean, while that may be true, there's more to it than that,
Yeah.
Um, and I just remember we were doing a class on Marx and sociology, and we were talking about religion being the opiate of the people and stuff like that. And I was like, which religion? Because there are so many, and I think the professor had even thought to like talk about anything beyond the major religions.
Hmm.
Um, so when it comes to those stereotypes and tropes, I think of, you know, the Rastas, the weed on the beach. Like we gotta do better. That is not all of the Caribbean.
And also with the religion, going back to what you said earlier, how you describe, some of it is mixed, that there is that as well. Like, there are people who, even in the Caribbean, may subscribe to Christianity or, mainstream version of Christianity, but also some still include some of the voodoo or Odu practices within that as well. So you can have, and then there's some that are only practice voodoo. Um, so I think there's that aspect as well within the religious diversity, especially because, you know, when those countries were being colonized and kind of forced into Christianity, one way to kind of hold on to some of their African religions and spirituality was to kind of bring that into um,
Mhm.
their Christian practice.
Right.
So you kind of see a mix.
Truly.
um, let's see. What advice would you give to writers? This is kind of similar to the last one, but what advice would you give to writers who want to write a queer or a Caribbean American character?
Advice. I don't know if I have any authority to give writers advice, but I know what I enjoy reading and seeing
Mhm.
more so. I don't think I've read a whole lot of queer Caribbean literature, to be honest. Um, there are a few authors and books that come to mind, but um, more so I look for like representations in TV and stuff like that. And but I would say that in order to develop a person of like a Caribbean consciousness, you have to have an understanding of the language. Um, and like Guyanese Creole isn't just an accent, it is a consciousness. And in the way that we say things and put certain thoughts together, it's not the same thing as like American English. It's just an accent. So knowing that and having that, I think, is really important. Whether or not your characters speak Creole, I think it's important to have that foundation.
Mhm.
Um, and then just really trying to take depictions of Caribbeanness outside of like a sandals advertisement. you know, there's so much going on in the Caribbean right now, politically, personally between people, and just getting into understanding how people are navigating their lives in the Caribbean in different ways is important.
Yeah. Um, I like that. I like what you said about, the language being part of the representation, because I know um, when Wakanda Forever came out and Haitians went to see it,
Yeah.
I think we all got excited
Mhm.
when we heard them speaking Creole in the movie, even though it was just like one or two lines, or like still it's in
Ooh,
there.
beautiful.
Yeah,
I see you. Yeah, it really makes a difference, I feel like, especially when it's done well.
yeah,
Um, if as a writer, you're not really that's not your comfort, I wouldn't say, you know, do something that you're not used to
yeah.
writing or hearing. Like definitely be true to yourself, but
Mhm.
um just have a basis of how language affects consciousness, I think is really important.
Yeah. Um, and also, like I always say, this is why sensitivity readers are so important too. Um, so if you are going to, you know, obviously, if it's completely out of your comfort zone to do so, don't. I wouldn't say do it, but just make sure if you are going to attempt it, to do it well and get sensitivity readers. Um, my last question, and anyone watching, we'll take a few minutes really quickly to answer any questions in the Q&A. So if you want to type out your questions in the chat box, you can go ahead and do so now, and I will read them off after this last question. But my last one is, are there any books or resources that you would recommend that can help writers in their portrayal?
One thing comes to mind. Well, two. A few things come to mind. And they are writers and books themselves that I admire. I think about specifically Toni Morrison and Jennifer Makumbi Nsubuga, who's a Ugandan writer. And they make it a point to say that as a writer, you can be yourself. I think, especially if you're writing from the perspective that you are a marginalized or minoritized person, there might be this like pull to try and explain certain things in the writing. And when I heard them say, like, you don't need to do that, you don't need to explain to an audience that isn't you what, I don't know. I'm thinking of like random Guyanese phrases are, it's okay to just put them there and let them be in the text. When you explain or over-explain yourself in writing, it's, Toni Morrison says, it's kind of like it's waving at you, but it's okay not to do all that waving, like, and this is what a Solara tastes like, just like put people in the moment, and they'll either like it or they won't. I love books of different cultures because I read a lot of like African literature and queer African literature, and half the time I don't have a frame of reference for really what's going on, but I will put the book down and then go to Google, I'm like, okay, what is this? What is that? So I can like better immerse myself in what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's also kind of how I felt like in one of my other book clubs, Diversity is Lit, we read, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, but we read Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. And that one had a lot to do with, African mythologies that I was not familiar with. So, one, it took me a bit to get into the story, but I also found myself like, afterwards going to Google and looking up some of the mythology and creatures that are mentioned, and kind of learning a bit more about that. But I like that it wasn't, like you said, over explained in the book, where you're trying to explain everything to people who don't know, because I think that more so pulls you out of the story than just, telling it as if it's for someone who's already familiar with it. So.
Exactly. And no one like asked Judy Blume to explain, Margaret's positionality. So I think we can just stand in our stories.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this. Again, if anyone has any questions, put them in the chat box. I don't see any questions right now. So I might just start wrapping up, but if you have questions, leave them in the box. But thank you for being here today and for sharing with us about Guyanese culture and queer and Trinidadian, all the cool stuff. So this
Thank you
was,
so much, Vanessa. This is a wonderful platform. I'm so excited to be a part of it.
yeah, I'm glad I was able to have you on here because this was a fun discussion. Um, and I do want to see more books with Caribbean characters. So hopefully we get those.
Yes.
I, and as far as books go, I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the resource question. If you are looking for books with Haitian characters, E.B. the Boy is a great one. Um, that she is Haitian American, I believe. But her characters and her book, what was it? American Street, I think. That was one I read several years ago, and that was my first kind of introduction to reading and learning about the voodoo religion. And it was completely different than what I was told growing up by family. And
Oh,
so
going on my Goodreads.
yeah, that was a really good one. And then she has another one I read, Pride, which is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice set in modern day New York with um,
Hard to
Afro Latinx characters. So that is,
That sounds fun.
yeah. Um, so yeah, that is pretty much it. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. Any final words you want to share?
Viva la revolución.
Well, thank you again for being here today. Thanks for everyone who watched this live. And if you are watching in the replay, thank you for being here. I hope this was super helpful and informative for everyone watching. And if you want more of these types of interviews, check out the playlist down below. I have a whole playlist with a bunch of different interviews, different people. So that's it for today. I will see you guys probably next month with another video. Bye.